All right, so the question that we have was, how do we create a sense of shared ownership over the work that we do so communities of color and underserved communities remain engaged long-term instead of for short periods and single issue items?
I think it's through shared leadership, and I think it's through cultivating that family at your organization or in your community so that everybody feels valued, everybody has a piece of the project that you're working on or the initiative that you're working on. And whenever we do work in our organization, we always try to equitably share the responsibility and the shine that comes with that project or the initiative, or some of the shade that comes with that project, with each member of our organization, no matter their job title or whatever their position is. And so they really get the chance to have ownership over each of our initiatives, and it's not just me out there, or it's not NACD or the organization, it's the individual we lift up, and we really are able to promote that empowerment that everybody has the potential to be a leader and have a voice in the community to change our communities. And that's the way that I found, piggybacking on Janice's comment, we bring our whole selves. We spend more time with our coworkers than we do with our own families most of the time. And so we need to really be and act and reflect as a family in our organizations, in this work, in this community. And we need to lift up our aunties and uncles that are doing the day-to-day work out on the streets, or our kids, and create opportunities for them. So one thing that we do is this campaign called Paint the Ave on Franklin Avenue. And we created the American Indian Cultural Corridor, but that was through community. And one of our latest projects was working with youth from Wade House and local muralists to paint the pillars and create a culturally specific mural right on the pillars of the Franklin Light Rail Station bridge. And hopefully you can get down there and check it out. That's youth work, and then we highlight and we celebrate those youths through a community celebration, so that they grow up thinking, hey, I was a part of that and I did that, you know? And so everybody feels ownership over the work, and that's a little bit of how we do it.
And just giving them the tools to and training that they need to be sustainable themselves. So
yes.
I'm David Martinez. I'm one of the BCLI fellows, and no need for that. So we talked about the number of focus areas that are out there in the world today, and this panel is a perfect example of the different priorities that exist in our community. But you touch on three that I think all of our communities can relate to, which were education, culture, and the preservation and respecting our culture and our history, and then nutrition. And we started talking about the different silos that we all live in, and how sometimes it feels like we're just hitting our head against the wall and not gaining enough power and momentum. And we started thinking, does a network exist between organizations where they talk about, or they have their highest priority items on a list, and they say, we're talking about organizing. Today we're going to move on this thing, and we're going to call on the network to help us move this thing forward. You know, we're just curious, does that exist? Because many of us will end up on boards and commissions, and if there's a move that any of us need to make, who do we call to get some real traction? And then that also addresses the time to get the results that the foundations and the funders are looking for.
It's something for our website. Yes.
Do you want to take it?
Yeah, Julia's got to interrupt everything.
Okay. So yes. So communities of color around the country, and this is around the country. Oh my goodness, around the state, actually come together and they create an equity agenda. Okay, so this is an agenda of solutions that they come up with. Some of it is legislative, but some of it is local, just within their communities, on how, you know, what would be a more equitable community to live in, right? And so these groups around communities around the country are connecting and working cross silos, right? They do this all the time. And so what we're trying to do is like begin to really elevate that so people can see that. So if you guys are on boards and commissions, and wherever you guys are going to be, being able to connect you to those local groups, from Worthington all the way up to Duluth, we would love to be able to do that, because they could connect, if you could actually be their voices within those spaces, right? And you could connect whatever you guys come up with in those spaces to real community, that would be very transformative.
Yeah, can I just? Oh, go ahead. Sorry. Get the next speaker up too. Yeah. Next question.
Yeah, we were just talking before we started here about how we're seeing more and more organizations coming together to do work. So, I mean, the building the field of community engagement is 6 organizations, and that work is leading to new partnerships between those organizations to do specific things. So I think there's a real opportunity that we could, with using the internet, using social media, to do more collaborations with each other, and it's a I think it's just an idea waiting to really get some energy behind it.
Probably just one person.
One person,
sure.
Okay. We'll huddle. We'll huddle.
Hi, everybody. Sorry. So I'm with Blue Cross and Blue Shield, Minnesota, and work in the Center for Prevention. And
what's your name?
Oh, my name is Catherine. Sorry. So one of the things that I'm really interested in and have been thinking about is, to me, when I think about a single word that sums up what engagement really is relational. So you're in relationship with the community. And there are lots of other ways to define it too, but that to me is the thing that I think really speaks to me. But I also notice that in our interactions with lots of different kinds of organizations, that there are lots of organizations that are in deep relationship with community members, but might not have it sort of built into the DNA of their organization, where they understand that sort of transition or that leap from that you engage so that you can organize to leverage power to change systems. So what you talked about, that's NACP's, that's in the DNA, that's what the organization does. But we observe that there are lots of organizations, like direct service organizations maybe, that are in deep relationship with community members. And I guess my question is, or what I'm kind of thinking about is, what's in that space where organizations kind of make the leap? How could that transformation kind of happen, where you start to understand that you could have a bigger impact if you harness those relationships and begin to organize and build power with the engagement that you're doing all the time. So I'm kind of interested in that transition.
Hey, these are great questions. All right. Taking the leap.
Somebody summarize that question.
I
get it.
Yeah, the question was about moving engagement to action, organizing.
It's
anybody?
Yeah, I can go for it. So it's about the and we do this a lot in our training, and how to go from the babies in the river syndrome. The babies are in the river and you're pulling the babies out the river, but you need to go upstream and find out why the babies are in the river. And then, there's a big hole in the bridge, you need to plug the bridge, and whatever the resources you need to organize to make sure that the bridge get, rebuilt or whatever, so that the babies are not falling in the river and, drowning. So how we do that is we actually, we have some service groups that are, that was once, they're still servicing, but they were doing the, bread and butter servicing of, housing and food, a shelf and clothing, But they realize, hey, when they do their surveys and whatnot, education comes up all the time, right? So they don't, this is the same even with Hope, who does a lot of around housing. This is education. So they're at the education table because they hear from their residents and people that they do services for around programming, that education is important, right? So what they are doing, they're actually connecting to organizations or joining spaces that are actually organizing in those communities, and they're bringing them to those listening sessions. You know, they're doing those listening sessions. They're bringing them to forums. You know, they're giving them, so it's all these different levers of engagement, even though they might not actually be doing it, to begin to transform that organization from service to begin organizing. But it's a process.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Next table. Did you come to a consensus question?
What's up?
Or a question?
For Project for Pride in Living. My question is, and our question was, when you have your organization, you have your mission, your goal, your purpose, and I think I heard you all say that it takes time. So there's burnout. You know, how do you keep people from falling off on the wayside when you're dealing with the dynamics of what's going on in the community? Like you said, our people are dying, people have historical trauma. Some people are still living out their trauma. So while your organization is being impacted by all that, you definitely have to endure. How do you keep up your endurance, and how do you deal with burnout and slow momentum?
Sometimes I think that the most, and I've read this in so many different places and heard this from people, that the most powerful change is the most kind of it's the subtlest change. It's like it's in people's consciousness instead of in a policy. I mean, certainly we need policy change, but we also need a lot of cultural change. And one of the things I've talked a lot about with people is how we tend to have our professional self and we have our personal self. And we are asked, that this young lady who got up earlier is a pre-med student. And I've heard this from a lot of medical students. Like, we're asked to leave behind part of ourselves when we go to work. And that this is something we need to change in our society, that we should be able to bring our whole self to our work, which means that we should be able to talk to each other in our work setting about our own health and our own well-being and our own, what we're going through. And it shouldn't be something like, oh no, you leave that behind and you just get to it, you know. So I've been in organizations where we've actually spent time talking about our own mental health, our own physical health, and saying, you know, you're getting burnt out. You need to take some time off. You need to, have time with your family. And it's not just this policy that, you have so many days off and you have to take them with 2 weeks notice or something, but that we create environments where we can bring our whole selves and talk about what we need to be healthy.
All right, next question. Next table.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Halal, and we had a very deep discussion. We had a very deep discussion at our table, and this question is open to all three of you guys. What tools and strategies have you guys used to communicate and engage the people who are most affected in the specific?
Did you want to take this one?
I think you should take it.
Sure. The question was around what kind of tools do we use in our toolbox to engage those most affected and suffering from a lot of disparities and the traumas in our community. And it's so hard to lead a horse to water and to try to make that horse drink the juice that we're trying to provide. But it's relational. It's the tools that NACD uses is our culture. For so long that's been stripped from us, and our languages and our spirituality and our practices of being culturally based people. There's strength in that. And when we can give our people those tools and that validation that it's okay to be indigenous, it's okay to be African American, it's okay to be Latino or East African. Like, celebrate that. That's an asset. That may be after everything is. My people always think that one way that we always talk about our kids is, you know, the only thing you can give to God is yourself at the end of the day. And He doesn't want money. He or she doesn't want what you have in this earth. So it's our strength in the culture and the language and the food and celebration, and even in mourning when somebody passes, how do we acknowledge that that person had value, and then they in turn start valuing themselves and their place in our circles, and we value their voice, and we empower everybody's voice so that they come to us, and then they start seeing that, oh, when I was talking, they were listening. And they're actually starting to implement some of my vision in the work and the projects. And so those are some of the tools that I would recommend using is look at your communities. What are the inherent strengths and the tools that you have at your disposal, and leverage the hell out of those, because that's really going to make change long term.
And as she come get the mic, I'm just going to say one thing.
Next table of speakers,
come on up. I just want to say one thing, that especially for communities of color, we always come in a lot to give them something. And so one of the tools I would say that you use is to change your thinking from deficit-mindedness to asset-mindedness, that these communities, we don't need to actually really go empower them. They have their power, right? So we need to create those platforms, those many opportunities to elevate that power.
Thank you.
So my table, we had a very interesting discussion.
Who are you?
Oh, I'm sorry, excuse me. My name is Jamet Staples.
BCLI.
Well, so our conversation went in a lot of different directions, and it spun off in so many different areas, but the question that really, I really like this question. I didn't even get a chance to look it over before we actually decided, but it's really, really good. And the question for you all is, how do we prevent the quote-unquote systems from subliminally
creating.
Okay. How do we prevent the systems from subliminally creating divisiveness among us in systems? I'm sorry.
Hey, please repeat that again.
All right. How do we prevent systems from subliminally creating divisiveness among us in systems?
Among us in systems.
Among us in systems. So
among us as communities. So we're the three of us are the three of you are, let's say, in a hospital setting, and sorry, I have a migraine. So the three of you are working for one system. That system, and you are each appointed to work your own specific, say the same job. Yet what we all have observed is that the divisiveness is very subliminally. So I prefer Jay, and Jay's temperament, his culture,
my looks,
is more amenable. His looks. He's the man. He's not Denzel, but he's the man.
He wants us to go tell everybody. He's the man. He's the man.
So that's more amenable to the systems, whereas Julia is too ethnic.
Yeah.
So then those subliminal divisive behaviors start to split us. So how do we maintain that unity amongst ourselves and not allow those systems to split us? Then we're doing their job for them.
I'll start. Well, I think the first thing is for us to be aware of them, and that's really hard sometimes when you don't, that's a lot of the work I do is help people of European heritage to see those things, because they're invisible to majority culture a lot of times. And so we have to call out when we see them and recognize them and teach people to notice them and to become better at noticing them. And I think it's a habit of mind for people who are benefiting from the system to ignore them. And so so I think, I try and teach people to recognize them and then call them out and then behave as if they weren't there. Because sometimes the most powerful thing is just those relationships that people form with each other, and just they're breaking the rules in a sense, just by being in relationship and caring for each other. And that's a powerful thing in itself.
So what you just described is institutional racism. Okay, so we're talking about institutional racism, and we should not be the ones carrying the institutional racism on our backs. Okay, it's a problem with the system, right? And so that's what we focus on. We actually do our trainings and whatnot around race. We don't focus so much on the internalized and the interpersonal. We focus on the systemic and the structural, because that's where you have power to change. So when you're dealing with people who are dealing with those divisiveness, if you could take it off of the individuals who are, daily contacting and thinking, I got something up on supervisor likes me because I look like Jay. That no, it's just absolutely unfair because it's institutional racism. So it's a deeper thing. So it's changing the system is where the focus, and then you all feel powerful that we know that the system is the problem. It ain't us, and that's what needs to change. So
how do we do that?
Well, what we're trying to do is actually train the system. So we are doing professional development right now with the Minnesota Department of Education, Minnesota Department of Health, the Minneapolis Public Schools. So we're trying, and actually Minneapolis Public Schools, St. Paul Public Schools, Osseo Public Schools, Robbinsdale Public Schools, Deer River Public Schools, Worthington Public Schools, and Owatonna Public Schools. So these is where we're trying to start there, to change the systems.
All right. Thank you for your great questions. We have wisdom as they, before they head out from this evening, because they've given us a lot of really great information already. And the question is, I'm pulling it up right now. And then Angie, if you can stay as they give the last piece of advice, Angie's got a couple of announcements, and then we'll go ahead and wish you a good evening. But the question is, what would you say to people who want to do work in these fields, who want to continue or start their organizing, continue or start community engagement?
So this was a piece of advice that was given to me that I'm going to pass on to you guys as an organizer and put it really into my perspective. Organizing is harder than brain surgery, okay? And the reason it's harder than brain surgery is everyone thinks they can organize, believe it or not. They think, as an organizer, they think that, oh, I could do that job, right? But nobody walks into the operating room and takes the scalpel out of a brain surgeon and say, hey, move over, let me do this, right? So to be an organizer, you actually have to get the tools and the training that you do to do the job. I tell people who think they can do my job, you just can't do my job, right? You need I can give you the tools and the training if you want to do this job. So if you really want to actually be an organizer and actually learn, part of the tools is to learn the tools of engaging community in a very authentic kind of way, then get with those people who offer that kind of training. My mom, who is very wise, said if you want to do what people do, you need to get to those who are doing that.
I think it's about, if you want to make change, you have to be able to make change in yourself and to be true to yourself and to call out your own BS and your own weaknesses and embrace those and work on those, because it's all about being authentic when you're engaging with our community. And our people are so good at sniffing out fake and, you know, BS, and they'll call you out. And that's okay. Sometimes you need to go through that. I've gone through that, and it's really checked me. But being able to acknowledge our shortcomings and see those in our community, I also think that it's about showing up. You know, it's about doing this and breaking bread with strangers and putting yourself in uncomfortable situations and positions, because you never know who you're going to meet and who's going to help you on your next journey, or the next path on your journey. And so show up to the public hearings, or show up to testify, show up to community meetings and to events, and build community as you go. And that's, I think, a little bit of the magic of doing this work.
And I would just add to that, to find mentors in the community. There's so many people who've been around for a long time and know have a lot of wisdom and experience. And so to ask to be mentored. I would also, just as sort of a mental habit, to keep thinking about the how, and so much of us get caught up in the what. But just to keep watching how things are done when you participate in things, and what are the ways that work, and what are the ways, because it's a lot of the process that sometimes is what stops people from participating. It could be Robert's rules. It could be, you know, it could be that the elders don't get to speak first. It could be the children aren't accommodated, you know, and taken care of. It could be, there's so many of the hows that stop us from really engaging with each other. And so just as you have a passion for the different whats, just keep noticing the hows.